If you're like me, you grew up watching pay-per-view car videos to get your fix of supercars and street racing. It was thrilling to watch some of these guys line up their incredibly expensive exotics and just fly down the highway to their next checkpoint. Now, as an adult, it's even more exciting to know even more rallies of all varieties exist today. But as a photographer that's never covered one, it can be a bit overwhelming when you're trying to figure out the logistics behind what to get, where to go, and how to make the most of your time during the event. On tonight's episode, we're connecting with a man who's been shooting rallies for 6 years now. From clunkers playing tug-of-war to exotics cruising through national parks, he loves them all. Our guest for this evening is none other than Minneapolis-based automotive photographer Alex Bellus. How's it going, Alex?
Good. How about you, James?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming on the show tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so why don't you go ahead and take the reins. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in photography and then how you got into rallies.
All right. Yeah. So I started, first time I ever picked up a camera was in high school. I was going to Germany on like a school trip, and my dad gave me kind of a hand-me-down, I think it was a Kodak, like 1.3 megapixel digital camera. And so I go off on my trip, and about maybe halfway through, I have to call my parents and ask them to send me more memory cards. I think because I had filled up I had an 80 megabyte card that I had filled up within like the first week of the trip. And so they sent me more cards, and I snapped more pictures, and I came back with this huge and probably incredibly boring slideshow of all the sights of Germany. Although from my perspective, it was mostly all the weird European cars that we don't get in the States. And so that was kind of what fostered my love for photography. I was already a car guy, and that really kind of sparked the creativity bug in terms of photography for me. A few years later, I went off to college, and a buddy of mine was working for a school newspaper and was kind of showing me all the gear that he got to play with, and that looked like fun. So a little bit later that year, I got my first digital SLR. It was a Nikon D50, I think, because I liked that I could use like older lenses. I didn't have any money to spend on camera gear at the time, so I was able to use a bunch of old lenses that my dad had in the basement or something I found to kind of get started. And I think with that camera, I had my first kind of paid gig, if you can call it that, shooting for a local Audi club in a parking garage, basically for gas money. And and that was back in probably 05, 06 maybe. So yeah, about 15 years ago now. It's kind of when I got started and started going to car shows with the camera and just shooting everything I could get my hands on. And here I am today.
I got to tell you, as somebody who started with Canon, and like that's what I grew up on. My dad had that. I was super jealous when I got into the DSLR and found out that Nikon shooters could actually use old Nikon glass on their cameras, and Canon couldn't without an adapter. Yep. Oh man. Yeah, that was. I remember. I think that was why I went with Nikon, because I was like, I had like a little Canon point and shoot at the time, and I remember. When I was looking at digital SLRs, I researched that, and I just randomly stumbled across that fact. I'm like, oh, this could be really helpful, because I think my dad's got he had some old Canon lenses too, but that wouldn't have worked on a modern Canon camera. And I was like, well, I don't have any money for lenses right now, but if I can just get a body for like, $500 or whatever, I think was all the money I had at the time. If I can just get a body, and I've got some lenses I can play with, it'll be manual focus, but that'll be a good place to start. And so I was really glad I started with Nikon, and I've been shooting with Nikon ever since. So are you still on a DSLR then?
Yep. Yeah. So still shooting with a DSLR. I haven't made the switch to mirrorless yet. But yeah, I've got a D850 now, and a couple other older DSLRs, D810, D4. I still keep around just mostly for sentimental reasons more than anything at this point. And just it's nice to have a backup from, when I need one. But yeah, it's I haven't made the switch to mirrorless yet. I don't know if I ever will. I just like the feel of DSLRs. But yeah, so that kind of got me started with car photography. And then, shooting car shows and stuff all throughout college. And then probably, I don't know, it would have been probably about 5-6 years ago was when I started shooting rallies. There's some people that had seen my photos from one of the car shows that they were at, and just reached out and said, hey, we're starting up this rally, and would you want to shoot it for us, kind of thing. And I didn't really know what that would all entail, but it sounded like fun. And so I said, yeah, sure. So that was a Crown Rally back in 2014 or 2015, I think was, the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's become quite a big deal at this point.
Yeah, it used to be called Central Crown Rally because it was from Minneapolis to Chicago, and started off in a Buffalo Wild Wings parking lot, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and now it's like they've got 3 rallies a year. They do one from the Minneapolis to Chicago, still one, and then they did. They've been doing, what was it, Chicago to like Nashville, Knoxville, kind of that part of the country. And they just added West this year, which was Denver to Las Vegas.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Nice.
And that was that first Crown Rally. I don't think I'll ever forget because I showed up. I had my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, drop me off in this Buffalo Wild Wings parking lot where there's just a bunch of random cars kind of strewn about. And I was just kind of hanging out, trying to figure out what car I was going to be in on that first rally. And a guy showed up with a pro-charged Ford GT that had like 1,500 horsepower, and he didn't have a co-driver and needed someone to navigate. So my first experience in a rally was driving with this absolute madman in his 1,500 horsepower Ford GT. So that was, once we left the parking lot and he got on it a few times, I was pretty hooked. So.
Yeah. Oh man, well, it's only downhill from there. So
right, yeah. And luckily, I jumped out. That was kind of lucky because I jumped into another car after a few checkpoints or whatever, and he ended up like a couple hours later, like middle of the afternoon, middle of nowhere, rural Wisconsin. He or lost a belt or something. I think the supercharger belt just destroyed itself, and he ended up stranded in a parking lot for about 3 hours till he could track down a belt that would fit. And got back on the road.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's not a good time.
Catch up, though. He made good time. He was out of commission for a couple hours, but he managed to like catch up to the front of the pack pretty quickly. But I suppose when you've got, that much horsepower, you can do that.
You just, 3 hours, so you triple your speed and boom, you're there.
Yeah, so. Perfect.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump into some of these photos. Right. We've got this amazing shot of an F40. Go ahead and kind of walk me through this shot.
Yeah, so I wish I could say that this was taken on one of the rallies, but this is actually part of a promo shoot I did before the Crown Rally left from Minneapolis a couple years ago. I don't think this guy came on the rally, but he ended up bringing a different car. I think this one had had some issues while we were out getting some of these photos. But yeah, he was originally going to bring this and I think a yellow Aventador Roadster. And so I showed up to shoot the Aventador at his garage where they were getting kind of the stickers put on, and we saw the F40 and was like, well, let's see if we can get this out for some photos too. So we had some extra vinyl with us and we threw it on this car and managed to get it out for some promo shots. And we got on the highway for a few minutes. We made it like 2 exits, I think, and check engine light or something came on. So we were kind of working our way back to his garage at that point. And it's one of those things where like I almost put my camera away because I thought the shoot was over, and we were just cruising along at slow speeds at that point, and suddenly I saw the street we were on kind of opened up a little bit and went from 1 lane to 3. I think we might have been in a turn lane when I took this photo, but the sun's coming through the trees, and I saw it. I was like, I can't miss this shot. So threw the camera out the window and started taking as many photos as I could, and luckily managed to get this one with the sun kind of coming through the big wing there. And yeah, that's one of my favorite kind of rally themed photos I've ever taken, I think.
Yeah, that full shadow just caught my eye when I was looking at some of these pictures you sent over. It's just, I love the full shadow in there, the sunlight coming through, the sweeping trees. I mean, it's just everything you want in a shot.
I wish we weren't driving through like a neighborhood. This would have been really like some of the other shots, like from Pikes Peak or something, where some of the more scenic places I've been able to shoot rallies. Sure. I wish this could have been staged there instead of driving through a residential area. But yeah, you take what you can get, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even with the buildings back there, I mean, they're kind of blurry. They look like good-sized houses, which kind of fits the theme of the car and everything. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, really, it's all about the car and that shadow. I mean, that just kind of pulls everything together. So, yeah, it's easy to kind of look past some of the other stuff in the background there.
So let's go ahead and start talking about how you even get into shooting a rally. Like, what's the steps that you would take to get involved in going and shooting a rally?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, if you were trying to shoot a rally for the first time, I would say, identify if there's any rallies kind of in your area, or, if there aren't, I guess, look around and see if there's any rallies kind of that you really want to shoot for, and just try to get a hold of the organizers, either through their website, drop them an email, figure out who orchestrates them through Facebook and reach out to them there. Try to connect with people that are on the rally ahead of time and just show them what you've shot. Say, hey, I really want to be a part of this. How do I get involved? A lot of these rallies don't necessarily have a big media budget. And if you're kind of reaching out of the blue, they might already have media that they've got budget allocated to and can't afford to pay you. But, that might be a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, is just see if, hey, can I, is there anyone that might have an extra seat I could ride along in, or something like that. And I know a lot of guys that have kind of gotten into this, that they started off that way. They had a buddy that was doing a rally and said, hey, I'm going to jump. Can I, ride with you or something? And, they just kind of shoot a rally from the backseat of their friend's car, or, something like that. So, yeah.
Sure. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this shot here.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that, this is Bonneville Salt Flats, right?
Yep.
So, and it's got, it's got the supercars, the doors are up. It's just the iconic rally shot. It's just a fantastic picture. Tell me kind of what the process was with this situation.
Yeah, so this is on Crown Rally West, which went from Denver to Las Vegas. This was about a month and a half ago, I think. And this is one of those deals where, luckily, I didn't actually have to put too much work into this shot to set it up. The Crown Rally, they've got a media director, and he's friends with all the guys with these cars already. And I got to the Salt Flats a little bit later, towards the back of the pack, because I was shooting rollers on the way. And so by the time I got to the Salt Flats, these cars were already parked like this, with the doors up, perfectly spaced and set up, basically waiting on me to shoot them. There's a bunch of other photographers and videographers that were on the rally that had kind of already been getting their shots of them. So I just I rolled in and quickly hopped out of my car and ran over and grabbed a couple of shots quick. And then these guys all hopped in their car and headed over to, they had a little spot set up where people could do top speed runs. They had like a 2-mile section of the Salt Flats that were blocked off and had timing and scoring from the guys that run like the Bonneville Speed Week and stuff, so that they could actually stretch the legs on the cars a little bit. So luckily these guys were all patient enough to wait for me to get there to grab a couple shots before they took off to race each other. But yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a great shot. I've always wanted to go out there, but of course, I have the vision in my mind that if I'm going to go out there, I'm going to take something like this out there to shoot it. And I just don't own one of those, so I can't just take something out there to shoot it.
Right. And I suppose it's probably a little tricky to convince people to go out there because, the salt gets everywhere. Every little nook and cranny on these cars. I think I had salt coming off of my car for like a week or two after I got home. And that was after driving, 2,000 miles to get home and getting the car detailed twice. I was still finding salt in it. So, that's the one downside about shooting on Bonneville, but otherwise it's pretty great.
Yeah, but you're no stranger to that anyway, right? From Minneapolis, you've got salt on your car half the year. So
yep, you get used to it.
All right, so let's take a look at one of these next images.
Oh, yeah.
I really love this shot because I love, it focuses on the people of the rally, not just the cars.
For sure.
Tell me what's happening here.
Yeah, so this was at one of the checkpoints on the Cannon Fall rally, which was last fall. We were in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. We were at one of the checkpoints. I think this might have been the lunch stop or something. And these guys had come in kind of this retro 90s kind of costume. And I was like, hey, what can we do that's fun with this? And so I was like, hey, do like a big high five or something. And so talked him into jumping in front of some of the cars and just put my camera on burst mode and grabbed as many frames as I could of that. And I put together a little GIF of them kind of jumping up and meeting in the middle kind of thing. And yeah, so.
That's awesome. And I love the giant inflatable cell phone.
Yeah.
That's such a nice touch to the outfit.
It really completes the look. That and the fanny pack. Can't go wrong with a good fanny pack.
And so their costumes were just kind of their own thing. That there wasn't an 80s, 90s theme to the rally?
No, I think the theme for this rally was monster trucks. So all the cars have, well, not all the cars. A lot of the cars had like kind of monster truck themes. So like Gravedigger and I'm not super familiar with my monster trucks off the top of my head, but yeah, like, so there's a Gravedigger theme and like a Macho Man truck and like some of the other famous monster trucks over time. And yeah, so it's kind of cool to have a mix of stuff like that.
I'm like searching my memory banks for the Hot Wheels monster trucks that I used to see as a kid. I can't remember any of them except Gravedigger.
Yeah, that's the one everyone remembers.
All right. So we'll actually use this opportunity to segue into another question, which is talking about like a shot list for rallies. Do you, when you approach a rally, work off of a shot list that you've created, or one if you're covering for somebody? Like, how does that work? Yeah,
so usually I will I'll try to talk to the organizer of the rally like a month or two, or basically as much lead time as I can get to kind of plan things out. But I try to get a list of what cars are coming on the rally and then what the route is. I try to get as specific with the route especially as I can. And then I'll kind of work with the organizers on like what kind of vibe they're looking for, you know. A lot of times they want me to focus on the supercars because that's the stuff that gets the most engagement online or the most attention. So we'll kind of focus on, usually end up kind of following different groups of more high-end cars on the rallies and kind of focus on shooting those guys. And then I'll work with the organizers on kind of either where they want me staged on the rally, because sometimes I will, if I don't have someone to drive for me, I will drive out to specific spots on the route and kind of be there in position to get photos when people drive by, if it's especially scenic. Other times I'll have someone driving for me so I can, you know, take rollers along the way and then stop in certain spots to get photos. But yeah, that's usually kind of how I approach like the planning aspect and shot lists. Sometimes there's a list of like specific cars in specific places that they want me to focus on. But usually like once we launch it, any sort of like serious plan just kind of goes up in smoke. And if you just try to get as close to what the plan is as you can pull off. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So with this image, this one really just stuck out to me because it's kind of like that quintessential, like this is the rally shot. It's the lineup. It's got the cars cruising down the highway. You've got great speed. It's scenic. It's just everything.
Yeah.
And so you want to talk a little about this one?
Yeah. So I think this was, Crown Rally West. This was somewhere I think this was in Colorado right before we got to Utah, if I remember correctly. We're going to Salt Lake City that night, and this was after a gas station stop, probably, I don't know. My buddy who was driving for me and I kind of took off from a gas station and tried to get out as far ahead of as many of the Crown Rally cars as we could. And so we're just in the middle of nowhere at this point, and all of a sudden we kind of look back and we see all these guys rolling up behind us, and we kind of owned the road at that point. There weren't really any other cars. And so we were able to hop over into the oncoming lane and stay there for like a minute or two while I was kind of positioning these guys. And so I got this shot of this guy, the driver Larry, in his 720S Spider with the Aventador behind him. And I think there's a 570S and a Viper and some other stuff behind him, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we got some photos of him, and then basically I would kind of wave him by and then hop in behind or hop in front of the Aventador, get some photos of him, wave him by, just kind of work my way down the line, basically get photos of everybody. But it's always nice when you can kind of get that leading car and you get a cool shot kind of following the road with all the cars kind of staged behind you like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that the lighting worked in your advantage here too, because it's just over that shoulder line. So you got detail down the side, you got that great color flare across the fender.
Yep.
And even just kind of that trickle of it looks like a light flare up there towards the top.
Yep. And the one hard part about shooting rally photos is you can't really do CPL turns, you know, when you've got a car going down the road at 80 miles an hour, as much as I wish I could. Because it's always a compromise between, do you want to be able to see the logos on the side really well, or do you want to be able to see the logos on the hood really well? And so you kind of gotta. Now that the more I'm looking at it, I'm seeing the yellow line down the side of the car, reflecting out the paint. Like, man, I wish that wasn't there. But there's only so much you can control at that kind of speed,
I mean, you can't just put like a polarizer on top of a polarizer and then you just twist it and you do the top of the car and the side of the car.
Have you tried that before?
I have, actually.
It doesn't work. No. Weird color casts and it just goes dark and yeah.
I was going to say, so you've tried it as well?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at first when you have that epiphany, you're like, why
hasn't everyone thought of this?
This is genius.
Yeah.
And then you go try it and you're like, that's why people haven't thought of this, because it's a dumb idea.
It doesn't work like that. Nope.
So when you're out shooting these rallies, do you have like a specific kit that you work with? Do you have certain lenses that you take? Because I know you're on the road for this, so you can't really take everything. So what is your go-to kit for shooting?
Yeah, so my go-to, I usually shoot with a Nikon D850. And then my go-to lens is usually the 24-70. It gives me enough versatility. You don't really want to shoot this kind of stuff with a prime lens, just because, sometimes cars are closer, further away, and it's just nice to be able to compose kind of any shot you want, basically, with a 24-70. But usually on top of that, in my camera bag, I'll have a 70-200. I'll usually try to throw at least one prime in there, whether it's a 50 or a 35 usually are kind of my go-to primes. And then if I've got room, I'll throw like a really wide 16-35 or something like that in there. I would say that the 24-70 though is definitely the one I use the most. The 70-200 comes out if there's like a track kind of event during the rally, or sometimes if we're on really twisty roads and I'm stuck kind of shooting, like I know I'm not going to be able to get in the oncoming lane to shoot kind of side to side stuff for a while, I'll throw the 70-200 on. And try to capture a big lineup of cars going through the twisties, and that looks kind of cool because sometimes if you just get a really close-up shot of the front of a car, it can look really menacing. So yeah, that's usually my kit. I usually don't worry about tripods, lights, that kind of stuff, just because there's a lot of moving around, a lot of moving parts. I don't always know what car I'm going to be in, or where, if I'm hopping cars on the rally, I don't know where my stuff is going to end up in terms of, clothes and stuff that I need for the rally. I'll try to pack as light as I can. Although if I'm bringing my own car, then I tend to bring more stuff. So I'll bring a tripod and some strobes and that kind of stuff, so I can get a little bit more creative at some of the stops. But yeah, generally D850 and a 24-70, and then my laptop so I can edit on the road.
So would you be comfortable in saying that that's kind of your go-to lens is the 24-70?
This kind of stuff, yeah. 24-70 is definitely the go-to.
I think it's just a fantastic focal length. It's so versatile with, you got plenty of width. So if you're going to do interior or these rolling shots, and then you can zoom into 70. And I know at least on the Canon, I'm sure the Nikon's the same way, there's a pretty decent macro setup with that where you can get pretty close. So it's nice for the detail shots at 2.8. You got, pretty solid bokeh. It's a nice lens. Yeah, and I know I think Kyle was saying on the other episode a while back how he likes the stabilized ones. Mine's an older one that isn't stabilized, but having a stabilized one is always helpful for this kind of stuff. Yeah, one. My Canon version isn't stabilized either, and for the longest time, I never even had actually, when I got my 70-200, that was my first IS lens. Yeah, same. And here. I remember thinking, this is fantastic for like panning, tracking shots, like when you're shooting, autocross or something. It's fantastic to be able to help stabilize. And it really ruined me then, because eventually I sold that lens off when I started to switch over to mirrorless, and I just. And of course now mirrorless, I use a pretty nice Sony A7, and so it's not built in, Yeah, so that makes a big difference too. Yeah, then you don't have to think about it. Just every lens is stabilized at that point. Yeah. Lucky. Well, let's go to the next one here. So this one was one that stuck out to me because, it's just crazy. You've got there's a lot Mario and Luigi and Yoshi and a flamethrower. And there's just a lot to take in with this image. So tell me about this photo. Yeah, so I actually just shot this a couple weeks ago. This was just outside of Cedar Rapids, Iowa at Hawkeye Downs, which is a little circle track there. And so I had been going around the track doing rollers, kind of car-to-car stuff on the track for,
maybe 45 minutes before this. And so this is my first time kind of coming off the track, and we were driving back into the pit area, and these guys were just kind of setting their cars up like this. And this is kind of one of those things, I stumbled into the shot more than anything. They had already kind of gotten together this plan. They were going to pose Yoshi with Wario and Luigi there. And then someone handed Heidi, the girl in the the Yoshi suit, just handed her a flamethrower. I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. So so I hopped out of the car quick and just started snapping away. And this is my favorite image from that set.
I mean, of course somebody there has a flamethrower. Why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah, it's standard rally equipment, really, and
I love the bananas.
Going on a rally without a flamethrower, really.
Right.
But yeah, and then the guys with that purple cart, I forget what it is. It's like a Cobalt engine in the back or something. I forget, but they've got little like mini bikes on a roof rack on top. And so they would take those down and they ripped those around the track a little bit and would just like cruise around at all the stops we had on the pit bikes, which is kind of cool.
That's just a great setup. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love that she's got the bananas there too.
Yep. Yeah, she's throwing those at people on the rally, trying to make them slip and spin out, I guess. Doesn't work as well in real life as it does in video games, though.
All right, so probably the next question I would have, and maybe this kind of fits in, but like, what's your favorite memory that you have from covering a rally? Like, what's a standout moment that has stuck with you? Yeah,
there's been so many. Just because like these rallies, there's so many things going on. It's hard to pick like one or two even defining moments, but my favorite rally was probably back in January this year when I did the Cactus Ball Rally. We went from Los Angeles up to Sonoma, and that was such a cool experience. I mean, we got a private tour of the Peterson Museum. We got to do laps around Laguna Seca. We got to kind of putz around Canapa Motorsports, which is just amazing. Everything there is so cool. And then like we ended up in wine country and just got to kind of wind down and relax, and that was really fun. And we drove up the PCH for most of it, so just gorgeous roads the whole way and great hotels, good meals. So I think that kind of seared itself in my memory as one of my favorite rally experiences, just because it was just so much cool stuff to see. And it was a smaller rally. I think there's like 10 cars or something. It was super, super small, and it was kind of like more of a scouting run almost. But that was just amazing.
It sounds fantastic. It sounds like a great trip.
Yeah, anytime I mean, and you're from the Midwest, so you get this, but like anytime I can get out of the Midwest, basically, is awesome, because there's just so many cool things to see in this country and around the world, especially. But yeah, just once you get outside of the kind of the Great Plains, there's mountains and hills and rivers and streams and oceans and all sorts of cool stuff to see and drive through. So I love a nice change of scenery from time to time,
Yeah, and I've always wanted to drive on PCH as well, so I've heard it's incredible.
That was I think that was my first time doing it, and yeah, it did not disappoint. It was really fun.
Well, let's go.
Maybe we'll have to have you along on the next Cactus.
Oh man, that would be fantastic. I don't know that I could do it, but if I could, I would jump at the opportunity to
let me see what I can do. Let me see if I got any pull with those guys.
So this was another shot that stuck out to me. It's kind of like the last one that we talked about that had the lineup of the cars. But with this one, I love that kind of motion and the twists and the turns here. You want to talk about this one? Yeah,
so this was on Crown Rally West. This was, we were going up Pikes Peak. So, we were driving up Pikes Peak, and we'd follow a group of cars for a little bit, or lead a group of cars for a little bit, and then try to find a pull off and let them go by. And this Corvette kind of caught up to us, and then suddenly we go around a couple of corners, and I look back, and then there's the Ferrari and a GTR, and I forget what some of the other cars, I think a couple of McLarens behind him, that had all kind of fallen into line right behind us. And so, so we're driving up this mountain, and we're probably at 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet at that point. And I'm in the back of my station wagon shooting out the trunk, And I think the driver of the Corvette told me afterwards he had some really great footage on his performance data recorder thing of me flying back and forth across the car because my co-driver, or because my buddy who was driving for me, wouldn't let me know when some of the bigger hairpins and stuff were coming up. So yeah, so I'm shooting, all of a sudden I get to a really sharp corner and I fly across the car and then fly across the other way. And yeah, so it was fun capturing the guy in the Corvette, capturing his reactions to me kind of flying back and forth.
So are you like harnessed in, or are you just?
Usually not. No. I mean, I hate to say it, I should be. But like, yeah, I mean, if I'm riding in someone's passenger seat, there's really no easy way to be harnessed in and shooting out the window. And I feel pretty safe when I'm shooting out of my own car. It's a station wagon and the back glass opens up separately, so the hatch can stay down. And so I can just kind of wedge myself lengthwise across the back of the trunk and kind of shoot out. And I've got a pretty big viewing area to shoot out of. So that actually works out pretty well most of the time.
You just need to set up like a drone or something back there, because it's got the gimbal. I don't know if you follow William Stern, but I know I think they were filming. I don't think they were like taking pictures, but I think they were filming, and they had a drone set up that way. I think it was like an Inspire.
Oh man, I've always wondered about that. If you could shoot with something that's normally used for video and stabilize that way, because that would make it so much easier, I bet, like in terms of you could use longer shutter speeds and get more motion blur. And yeah, it might be kind of cool to try shooting with something like that that's traditionally used for video, but have a rig set up for still photos instead.
Yeah, I would love to try that. I've got that Phantom 4 Pro, and I've considered even just like not putting the blades on and just holding it, and you could do walk around like car show footage with that, and it would be like super stable then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely an idea to try.
Yeah, to try something like that with photos out of a moving car would be super cool. You could probably mount that on top of your car. Even, of course, I guess it's such a wide field of view, the pictures wouldn't be great, but
might be kind of fun to play around with, though. Didn't GoPro, I think, made a drone? Remember that? The GoPro drone? And you could actually pull the GoPro right off of it with the gimbal. Like the whole assembly would plug right into this drone body, basically. So like maybe getting one of those as the ticket,
Yeah, and I was looking at that before I bought my Phantom years ago, and they launched them, and it quite literally crashed, and so it kept having issues with that, and I was like, I'm just going to go with DJI because they've been around long enough; they kind of know how to do this. And
it was a really cool idea, though. I mean, if DJI made something like that, I would buy one for sure.
Yeah, I think they just launched today a new Osmo, that holds your phone. They keep releasing these things. It's like, put that tech into one of your drones.
That would be awesome. Someday.
Yeah, eventually they'll get there. All right, let's go to the next image here. So let's talk about this one. This I sent this one to a buddy earlier today that has helped co-host in the past, and he was like, you got to figure out what's going on here because this looks nuts.
Yeah. So this was the Clunker Cruise, and I think they only did 2 of them, unfortunately. But so the concept of this was you buy a car that the cheapest running driving car you can find, basically that is technically safe on the road, and then you donate it to a charity at the end. So there's a couple of charities around Minneapolis, I think. I forget which one it was that took the cars after this, but basically you buy the car and you sign the title over at the finish line to this charity. And so people kind of showed up at the start line and with all sorts of junk, and it was awesome to see. In this case, it was a Cavalier that had been hit on the passenger side pretty hard, and so the door didn't open anymore, and the window had broken out, and so the co-driver in the car didn't want to climb in and out of the passenger side window over broken glass to get into the passenger seat. And this is kind of an under the radar rally. It wasn't like organized as well as some of the other ones. It was kind of meant to be kind of for fun and not as serious. So this cop showed up because he saw a bunch of cars that looked like they had been pushed out of the junkyard basically into a parking lot, and was wondering what was going on. And once we kind of explained it to him, we managed to talk him into helping us rip the door off of this Cavalier to make it easier for the passenger to get in and out of. So that was definitely one of the highlights of this rally. There's a lot of shenanigans, though. It was kind of like those junker challenges that they do on Top Gear, basically. So you bump into other cars, at stops, or sometimes intentionally, other times not as intentionally. I think there's a couple cars that the brakes went out, a couple of cars the engines blew up, but it didn't really matter as long as the car could limp its way to the finish line. So some of the last minute fixes to kind of keep things running were interesting. I think I did see one guy put like Mountain Dew in as a substitute of coolant. It's the same color, right? So we'll just try putting Mountain Dew in this thing in the radiator to see if that'll keep it going to the finish line.
Oh man.
But yeah, and then there's a bunch of fun challenges that went along with this too. So I think we might get into some of those in some of the future photos. But yeah, so this is one of those things. It's just one of those audacious, or just one of these crazy kind of scenarios where you're at this thing and you don't know if the cop's going to give you a hard time or not. And normally on these rallies, cops will pull you over and yell at you for going too fast or driving recklessly. And this time we got the guy to actually kind of take part a little bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I first looked at this, I didn't even pay any attention to the fact that it says police on that SUV. I just saw the door is being ripped off by this SUV. So I just figured, oh, this is somebody that's part of the rally. They put wrap on their SUV. Didn't even notice that this is actually a police officer. And that just makes it so much better.
Right? Yeah. It's one of those crazy things that happens.
All right, so let's take a look at another one here. So this is another one from the same rally.
Yep. Yeah, so this was the tug of war. So the cars will be chained together, and you can kind of see in the background on the far right side of the frame, there's kind of middle right, there's like an orange line painted on the concrete there, and that was the line that the cars would be centered over, and then whichever car got pulled over that line would lose the tug of war.
And I love that, like, when I looked at this, I had no idea what was going on. I just assumed, I saw that car in the background. I thought he was just like doing a burnout. And so to hear you explain that it's like a tug of war thing, and then you look at like this Oldsmobile, and it doesn't look like there's anybody in that car. Yeah,
and I actually don't know if there was someone in it or not. This might have been after they won, and the guy was just doing a burnout because maybe the driver of the Oldsmobile maybe got out and parked it, and this guy was just trying to get off the chain or something. I don't know. But yeah, it was just the abuse that some of these cars went through was pretty awesome.
And I love that the most expensive looking thing in the whole image is either the workout equipment on top of the car or the bull horns on the hood. Like everything else, even the S10 or whatever it is on the side, like all of that looks like it's cheap in comparison to at least those bull horns that you would see at like an antique shop for like $500.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and I think it's just bungee strapped on there too. So I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's perfectly centered in between those beautiful racing stripes.
Right. I'm just waiting for, Forsteiner's got to come out with a kit that incorporates a pair of bullhorns like that onto one of their Lamborghini kits or something. That's what the people want. That's what they need to see.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. All right, let's go take a look at the next one here. This is another one, same rally, just as ridiculous.
This one of my favorite camera cars I've ever ridden in, because you've got great field of view. You don't have a roof or windows to get in the way, and it's a big bench seat back there, so you can kind of hop from one side to the other to shoot out of. And being a minivan, it's a pretty plush ride. But I think this was one of the challenges on a motocross track. So people had buckets of water. I think you had like five 5-gallon buckets of water, and you had to load them into the car and then drive around this motocross track, and whoever had the most water in the buckets left at the end of the run won. So, people were just spilling water all over themselves and getting dirt everywhere. And yeah, that was a fun challenge and fun to try to capture it too. So I was kind of standing in the middle of the course as these cars were flying through the dirt all around me, and just trying to capture all that was interesting.
That's fantastic too, to think about all that water in there. And some of these guys probably in some vehicles are actually trying to stabilize that. And then these guys probably didn't care at all.
No. Most people didn't care too much, but it was interesting to see the strategy, how some people would try to hold the buckets and balance them, wedge them into wherever they could to try to keep them from tipping over. And then still make it through in the fastest amount of time possible. So yeah.
That's amazing. So this next one is just like as much of a 180 as you can take from what you're looking at. But this was one of your favorite images from the selection that you sent me to pick from for tonight's episode. And so why don't you share with me a little bit of information about this and why it is you like this image so much?
Yeah, so I mean, the subjects in the photo are awesome. I mean, you can't go wrong with a 918 Spider and a P1 and an Aventador and a GT3. I mean, all of those cars are just awesome and fun to shoot in their own right. I think for me, what really the kind of story behind the shot that is what makes it so special to me. And this was, I shot this the night before one of the rallies launched from St. Paul, Minnesota. And it was a super quick turnaround. I think I had like maybe 15 minutes with these cars, and I ended up with like 3 or 4 kind of finished images. So I was really in a hurry to make something cool and polished with these. So to get them positioned and then light them and do all the editing and everything, I only had like a couple of hours total. It was like 15 minutes to shoot them and then a couple hours till they had to be delivered to the client. So it's kind of a mad dash to get them done. But these were light. The cars were light painted. I was just using like a $30 LED kind of shop light that I bought on Amazon, I think. And it worked out pretty well.
And no love for the car up on the lift at all.
No, well, that wasn't one of the rally cars, so that's why it kind of blends into the background. It isn't lit as well as some of the other stuff on the ground there. But that's another GT3, and I think that has the some really sick gold BBS wheels on it too, if I remember correctly.
I so badly want to drop this into Photoshop and just crank those shadows and take a look.
Right.
Well, it just blows my mind too to hear you say that you have 15 minutes with the cars. Not only did you take this one, because I mean it would have taken me minimum of like 30 minutes to probably create this to shoot this, but then to hear that you like actually produce like 3 or 4 images in like 15 minutes. Now I realize the editing time is there's more editing time there too, but just to be able to shoot something like this so quickly, does that come from your experience of having done a lot of this?
A little bit. I mean, I think that's definitely a component of it. But I think what really worked to my advantage was light painting versus strobing, because usually I would strobe something like this, but it helped that I was able to light paint because I was able to do just a couple of like long exposures and just run around the cars basically as fast as I could with the little shop light that I had, trying to light up as much of the cars in each pass. And that made the editing go a little bit faster for this. So I think that the editing, being able to get them delivered to the client within an hour or two was the biggest challenge, but also kind of the most rewarding part of it.
Sure. Well, and it just, I mean, to think that like this is an image that was photographed in less than 15 minutes when there are, green photographers like myself that have been doing stuff like this, a little bit for a few years. And it's like, I couldn't come close to it. Like I could take all of the time you took editing this too and apply it, and I probably still wouldn't get as clean of an image as you've gotten here, let alone multiple images.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to see the quality of your work. And I love your shots that are in the shops where you've lit the vehicles, because they're pristine.
I mean, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, but I mean, you just had Andrew Link on the podcast, and I mean, I can't even imagine how much better of a job he would have done with this than me. I mean, that dude's a freaking master. He's a wizard with an ice light. So
he's definitely a very talented guy.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look here on the next one. So this shot was another one that you sent over that was kind of one of your favorites. And what sticks out to me is just how crazy low you are to photograph this, and then how wide open the lane that you're driving in is. I can't even wrap my head around how this is possible without like mounting the camera to the front of a car, like the fascia. So kind of walk me through what's going on here.
Yeah. So on this rally, I was riding in a friend's Ferrari 348, I think, if I remember correctly. And we were in the left lane, and I think I had him pull over as far to the left as he could go, almost onto the shoulder, basically. And then I was basically sticking, half my body out of the car and holding the camera like a foot off the ground, I think, to get this shot, and just wasn't looking through the viewfinder or anything. I didn't have a tilting screen at that point. I think this is my D810. So yeah. And then I just put it into burst mode and kind of spray and pray and hope that I got lucky. And it was one of those shots where I probably took 50 or 60 shots of that car kind of going down the road. And this was like the one image that turned out. So that's unfortunately a lot of what the rally stuff, and especially shooting rollers, ends up being, is just kind of, you end up with kind of the raw ingredients there of a cool car and sort of this location isn't the most interesting, but it's very clean. It's a nice kind of, it's a little boring. It'd be nice if it had like some mountains or something more interesting in the background instead of cornfields, but you take what you can get, and the sky looked cool and the car kind of matched the color of the sky. And so, yeah, you just kind of take whatever ingredients you've got handy and put them together and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, the power lines aren't too intrusive either. I mean, they're kind of nicely spaced. That one just kind of peeks over the top of the car, but otherwise you've got them there in the distance, and the lines kind of help separate the sky and the car. It's a really cool composition on this shot. I love the heavy ground presence there because there's so much speed sweeping towards the camera.
And it's kind of funny looking back at a lot of these images that, I shot a year or two ago or 3 years ago or whenever. And like catching stuff like that a lot of these I edit from this, while I'm driving basically. Like I'll usually have my computer with me when I'm on these rallies so I can edit while we're, in between groups of cars basically. So I probably shot this, and I would bet within an hour or two afterwards, I had probably edited it quickly on the road, so that's why they're not always like as polished as some of the stuff where I have a little bit more control over it ahead of time. Like the last shot we looked at, for instance, this will be something where we're just driving down the road, and I'll whip out the laptop and edit away for a few minutes, and then usually use my phone as a hotspot to send stuff to Dropbox and then off to the clients. So I try to provide photos like in real time, basically, as they're going. And I've gotten good feedback from the organizers every time I've done that. So. Oh
yeah, I bet. Like high quality coverage. That's awesome.
Yeah. It beats just Instagram stories and quick little cell phone snaps. So. Right. Yeah.
And so this was the third one that you had kind of pinged as one of your favorites out of the bunch that you sent. Why don't you kind of explain this one?
Yeah, so this was in the Black Hills a couple years ago in South Dakota. I think I had my wife driving at the time, and we had pulled over to kind of wait for we were ahead of a good number of cars at that point. So we'd pulled over at this rest stop, or this little pull off on the side of the road. And I was shooting some of the cars as they were kind of zigzagging their way through some of these rock formations. And luckily I was kind of waiting for this car to come through because it was one of my favorites on the rally. I love that bright metallic orange, and it's just a cool car, and then it just happened the guy was driving by and saw this overlook and thought he would stop and take a picture with his phone, I think. And so he stopped right there, and I was luckily waiting for him. So it gave me a minute or two to kind of capture a good composition, with the big rocky outcropping in the background and lots of sky and just enough elevation where you can kind of see some of the hills and stuff in the background. And then, you've got that really nice kind of side light and shadow that really brings out the color of the car, and then just kind of helps it stand out from everything else in the background too.
Yeah, it's really cool the way the shadows kind of frame the car there across the bottom.
Yeah, I think this was probably with my 50 1.4. Usually whenever I'm going down the road, I think we talked about this earlier, I like to use my 24-70 for the rolling shots. But then, whenever I stop, I love to switch really quick over to the 50 1.4 or the 35 1.4. And it makes some of the like shots at gas stations and parking lots and some of that stuff look a little bit more interesting than, using a smaller aperture, or bigger aperture, I guess.
All right. Well, that kind of covers the images that we had planned to discuss. So one of the last tips then, not tips, one of the last things that I wanted to ask you about was about tips that you would have for photographers that are green, that kind of want to get into shooting rallies. Like, what advice would you have for those photographers?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier in terms of like actually getting on board with some of these rallies and just, reaching out, trying to make connections with either the organizer of the rally or make friends with the people that are going on the rally to see if you can snag a spot with them, and kind of work your way in doing that. And then I think, the trick is to pack light so that you can move quickly and you're not worried about, losing stuff or leaving it behind if you have to switch cars or and that kind of stuff. So learning to make the best of not having a lot of gear and just making the best of kind of situations that are constantly changing and everything's moving and happening on the fly. That's a really important skill to have if you're going to be shooting rally stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And as far as I know, we kind of touched a little bit on a shot list, but how important is it to focus on the whole rally as opposed to just capturing the cars, but also the people that are a part of this?
Yeah. So I think capturing the people is definitely a part of it too. The cars on the road kind of tells the more convenient story, I guess, or the more obvious story of the rallies. So having cool cars and cool locations, but having images of the people on the rally, kind of, especially if there's like a nice dinner afterwards or something where you can kind of get some pictures of people talking to each other and looking excited and sharing stories from the day. That always kind of works really well to supplement some of the other photos throughout the event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us tonight, Alex. It's really awesome to get to know you, to hear your story, to check out some of your work. And again, like, I know I've learned a lot just from what you've shared about your experience with rallies. And I think a lot of other people who tune in will be able to pick up some great tips from this. We just really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Yeah, my pleasure.
And now, if people want to see more of your work, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so either my website at alexbellusphoto.com or Instagram at Alex Bellus Photo. Same for Facebook as well. So, yeah.
Okay. And do you post, to one area more than the other, Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, usually Instagram first, and then it kind of trickles to Facebook and my website from there. But yeah.
Okay, cool.
That would be great.
And if people have any questions, can they reach out to you and hit you up on Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to slide into those DMs and talk shop, I'm always around.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again. And thank you, everybody who tuned in to watch tonight. We really appreciate you guys checking out the show and, giving your feedback, offering up questions and suggestions for future episodes. We hope you enjoyed this one. And I know that we will be back here soon with another great guest. So again, we appreciate Alex taking the time, you guys tuning in, and we will check you guys out next time. Have a great night.
Thanks.